Hi and happy Monday. Thanks again for all of you that are watching this video today. I'm super excited to do a live one today with one of my very favorite people, Bill. How are you, Bill?
I am just excellent.
Good. And
Yes.
I am super excited to do an interview with Bill today. And Bill, what I'm doing here is I'm introducing my company and talking about sobriety. And at Love Prevails, we offer intervention support services and peer support services for those that are struggling with addiction. I would love for you to reach out to me either through the website that I have attached to this video. You can reach out to me personally on Messenger. I'd love the opportunity to talk with you. I've been really looking forward to talking with Bill. He is literally one of my most favorite people in the whole wide world. Yes, you are, Bill.
You flatter me.
Yeah. You used to be in the radio industry, right?
Yes, I did for about 50 years.
Yeah. Were you a radio show host, or did you just work in the offices, or what did you do?
I was always involved in management or advertising.
All right, so you can give me some pointers by the time we're done with this, right?
I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm hoping for that. No, I'm kidding. No, what did you do this weekend?
This weekend is over, isn't it? Yeah, and nothing really. Watched some sports on TV, went to some AA meetings, and finished a 900+ page novel. So that's about all I did.
Did you read all 900 pages this weekend?
No. I borrowed the book from my daughter in Georgia while I was in Georgia last weekend, or the week before that, and started reading it then and couldn't finish it, so she just told me to put it in my suitcase and finish it when I got back to Colorado.
Nice,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Had to get down to watch my great-grandkids play baseball, and their season opener started last weekend.
Yeah.
So not yesterday, but 8 days ago. Yeah.
You're a baseball lover, aren't you?
Well, of course. Yeah. Like you've noticed that framed picture on the wall. A lot of people probably don't even know who Cy Young is, but it's a letter that he wrote my aunt in 1946.
Wow.
That he thanked her. It was a thank you letter and had nothing to do with baseball. But it was a personal handwritten letter from him to my aunt, and I framed it because it's a piece of work and it's valuable. Yeah.
That's awesome. It is a really cool letter. I got to see it, so I was pretty impressed. I used to work the JUCO World Series every year when I was a kid in Grand Junction. Are you familiar with JUCO World Series in Grand Junction?
Sure, very aware of it.
And I have a signed baseball from, I think it's Richard Maris's son.
Roger Maris.
Yeah, Roger Maris's son.
Yeah.
I think his name is Richard Maris.
Okay.
I don't know, but I have a signed baseball from him from the JUCO World Series.
Cool.
So many years ago when I used to walk up and down the stairs and sell soda.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made pretty good money doing that. It was a lot of fun.
I think that's funny. Baseball. Probably my greatest baseball thrills was always getting drunk with Mickey Mantle because he lived about 12 miles from my hometown, and anyway, those were some memorable days of drinking back in the days. Anyway, what else is going on?
Yeah, I was too young during that. I didn't even know what drinking was.
Well, of course, this was back
In
in
the
50s. I started drinking when I was seven. I didn't start drinking. I had my first sip of alcohol when I was about 7 years old. And my teetotaling grandma, she did keep bourbon in the house for very special occasions, and one of them was for medical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a little cough, kind of a serious cough, the croup. And at 7 years old, she mixed up a concoction that it consisted of bourbon, warm water, honey, and lemon juice.
Sounds like a hot toddy.
Well, I think it could have been, but I tasted it. Now here's why. When did you become an alcoholic? Well, I thought it was probably when I started getting fired from jobs and car repossessed and evicted from homes and all these things. But when I really looking at it after several years of sobriety, I remember that little concoction that my grandma mixed up for me.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the taste of it, but more than anything, I liked the little numbness that got on my cheeks. You know, I could feel something that felt good.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I look forward to getting a croup or coffee again. But did I ever think that I was an alcoholic? I didn't even realize that maybe I was an alcoholic on the first taste, because more than the taste, I liked the feeling, and I wanted it again. You know, it felt good, and that was probably a lesson of whoever's watching this that might take heed. That, you know, if you get that reaction, of course we all drink because it makes us feel better. I mean, we think that a little hot toddy is relaxing. It is, but after 2 drinks, we want 3 and 4, and we really get relaxed.
Right.
Yeah.
So we might be having some connection issues here. I saw that we have a slow connection, so I hope that there's no interruptions with the video. But we're just going to keep going and hope for the best here. But you've got a little bit of sobriety. How many years do you have? 53.
It's November 17th, 1971. So I've got, I'm in my 54th year of sobriety, which my birth date is November 17th. I'll be 54, yeah.
So do you realize you have been sober as long as I've been alive?
Well, no, I haven't.
I'm a 71. I was born in 71.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Well,
June 9th, 1971. June 9th, 1971.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. Well, child. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, you know, I will be 89 years old in August.
Yeah.
And but I have a motto or a theory or a slogan or whatever. Yeah, I might be old, but I plan on getting older, and that's my thesis. And the thing is, you know, when I look back on it, I was 35 years old when I had my last drink, and if I hadn't have done, and if I would have continued to drink, I wouldn't have lived to be 53 years old, let alone be sober 53 years.
Wow.
So whoever's watching this video, take heed. It's our disease of alcoholism is extremely fatal.
Yep. Every time I don't see you around, I always worry you had a relapse.
Oh,
no, I'm kidding you. So you mentioned that you know, some of the effects of your drinking, you know, but why? What made you decide to get sober in the first place? Why did you even think that you needed this?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I know how I think now, that I needed it a long time before I even thought about AA. I really could have been I really could have used AA 10 years before I got sober. I could have, instead of 1971, I could have probably done. I started getting fired from jobs, or being lackadaisical, or getting in debt, or doing all kinds of things long before I called AA. But it took me enough car repossessions, job terminations, You know, I was a hotshot person in the radio business, and I ended up my first job in radio. I ended up managing the radio station, and one of the reasons I ended up because my wife and I we consider ourselves very sociable, and when the owners of the radio station, this was in Joplin, Missouri, the owners were in St. Louis, and they'd send down the general manager of the radio station about once a month. And after they fired the station manager because he was a real drunk, and I wasn't a real drunk yet. I could drink all night, and at age 21, why, I could get up the next morning and drink some coffee and be ready for work like a tiger, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but the general manager who lived in St. Louis would come down to Joplin about once a month and spend about 3 days, and he'd bring his wife with him too. And so the guy that was the station manager was a real drunk, and the advertising sales manager was an alcoholic also. But they fired the station manager and made the sales manager of the advertising department the station manager, and they promoted me to sales manager. Mm-hmm. But after a while they come down to Joplin, and this guy was the manager. They couldn't find him. He'd be off drunk somewhere, and they finally ended up making me the general manager, or the sales manager, or the station manager. At age, I was 22 years old.
Wow.
What a resume. I had a tremendous resume that entitled me to better jobs in Topeka and bigger jobs in Kansas City because of this. This general manager who came down to St. Louis would spend a few weeks, and Peggy, my wife, and I, who is a drinker, and now she was sober for 48 years when she died. Mm. So, but we'd go out and entertain the general manager. We had accounts all over town that advertised with us, and we'd trade out advertising at some of the better restaurants and stuff. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Caston, who was the man that came down to visit, well, we went out to dinner with him constantly. We're really, well, call it brown nosing or whatever, but we were in, you know. And I managed that station for 3 years, and then they said, "Bad news, Bill. We're going to sell this station, and we think the purchase is going to want to manage it itself. Right. And they're just warning you that you'll probably have to find another job." Well, my resume looked pretty impressive as boy station manager, and I got a swift and easy job in Topeka, and we were very fortunate, and our social skills hadn't diminished all that much. In fact, they've increased. My owner of the radio station I work for appointed me as a national sales manager, and we travel with our spouses to places like St. Louis and New York and Chicago. Wow. Calling on national accounts, and still had my act together. I drank daily, but until I was there 6 years, and I started screwing up a lot. I really did. And but while I was looking for a job, after I was forward in Joplin, then I was going to have to find a new job. I went to Kansas City first and interviewed with some large radio stations. Mm-hmm. In Kansas City, and they didn't have any openings at the time. And except I had a friend that was a advertising salesman at a big WDF in in Kansas City, and he resigned there to take a television job. And I called him. I said, "Ken, I understand you're leaving WDAF and going over to Channel 9. He said, yeah. I said, "Hey, man, if that opening is, who is Cliff still the sales manager?" Who was an old guy that I thought I impressed. I said, "Yeah, he is." So I said, "Cliff, what did you earn last year?" Well, this is in 1968. And he said, "Well, last year I earned $24,000. Now this would be like almost 5 times more now. I mean, it would be close to 100,000 or more." He said, "And if I stayed here, it would be over 30,000 this year. But I needed to get in the TV." So I said, "Okay." I called Cliff, and he said, "I still got your resume. Do you want to come to work for me?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, and at the same time, almost simultaneously, when and he's hired me over the phone. He said, like, "You got the job," and almost simultaneously, I put the phone down, and the owner of the station came into my office and was really mad at me because of some screw ups that I did with some accounts, because I just screwed up. I forgot what it was. But he said, "What are you going to do about this?" I said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I quit." Because I already had a better job. But it blew his socks off, But I quit and went to WDAF, and this is in Kansas City. There were dozens of people wanting this job, and I got it without even a thought. 11 months later, I got fired.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. And but the day I got fired, another radio station was calling me, "Hey, Bill, I understand you're leaving DAF. We got a job for you. When do you want to start to work?" And I said, "Well, that was a Monday." I said, "I was at a Kansas City Chiefs game last night, and I lost yesterday afternoon, and I'm I lost my voice, yelling so much. Said, I'll see you Tuesday or Wednesday." I mean, I did this, and they hired me immediately, and 9 months later, they fired me.
Oh, shoot. And were you losing these jobs because of your drinking?
Well, of course.
Yeah.
What else would it? Incompetency? Something like that. Oh, God. Yeah, because of my drinking. You don't go from, because I even own part of this radio station in Topeka. That's how much the guy liked me, and he gave a couple of key employees stock in the company. And that's, but anyway, I remember when I got fired from this rock and roll station in Kansas City, that was the last time I ever got fired. And that's one thing about it. How long I haven't been fired in 54 years.
Wow.
Well, wow, I haven't drank in 54 years.
Yeah.
Somehow I quit getting fired.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Sorta. And anyway, but yeah, this last job, we work on a 15% commission in advertising, at least in our sales commission. And first of all, I went out with a media with a representative, rep to Macy's, and her name was Sharon, and she was been a drinking buddy forever. She just handed me a advertising contract for $10,000. So that was sales commission would be $1,500. Not too bad. And I got back to the office with this nice contract, but I was too befuddled from drinking all afternoon with her. I slipped into my my desk drawer. So I'll figure it out in the morning too, because there are so many commercials that go in drive time morning and drive time afternoon, drive time and midday and night and all. And I was too little confused, and I'll figure this out in the morning when I put it on a radio station's work order. Well, then I forgot all about putting it in my desk drawer.
Oh, shoot.
Now, about 3 days later, I was out with Brian Hellsberg Jewelers. She handled the advertising for it, and she liked to drink. We were good friends, so we went out for lunch and drinking martinis and all this stuff. And she said, after lunch, drop by the office. I got your Christmas order for this in about August, but it started in about mid-September into Christmas time for Hellsberg Jewelers.
Right.
Same thing. I got back there and it was evening, and I thought I'll figure this out in the morning, and it slipped in my desk drawer, and it was a $10,000 order.
Wow.
Well, so in sales commissions, I got $3,000 there, and that was a lot of money in 1968 or 67. So I forgot it, and they fired me a couple of days later, and a couple of days after that they were cleaning out my desk, and the boss, who liked me but couldn't keep me, he said, "Bill, do you realize you cut yourself out of about $3,000 in sales commission because we found $10,000 or $20,000 worth of contracts that you hadn't turned in?"
Wow.
Yeah, so shit like that, and but they knew I was a drunk. They were going to fire me anyway. There was this last station in Kansas City that I worked for was owned by a corporation, but the head of the corporation, you're probably too young to remember, but he was a financial hero back in the 50s and 60s, William F. Buckley. Yeah, have you ever heard of it?
I think so.
Okay. Well, he was on TV all the time talking to the world about politics and finance and all this stuff. He owned the radio station, the chain of radio, and he was making a tour of the stations that his company owned. And he even owned the station. He and John Lennon owned a classical music station in New York that didn't have anything to do with this, but this was his caliber of broadcasting, Well, anyway, I was dying to meet William F. Buckley, and they were going to be at noon. We were going to put on a little noon spread, have lunch at the radio station with all staff, and I come pulling into the driveway about 10 till noon to meet William F. Buckley, and one of the sales reps comes running out and holding up, "Bill, don't go in there, don't go in there." And he said, if Mr. Buckley saw you, he'd tell Jim to fire you in a minute. They were carrying me, but they just were trying to, anyway. So I didn't get to meet William F. Buckley, but probably 30 days later they had to fire me. But that's the way alcoholism goes, Yeah. So anyway.
So I've heard your story so many times, and I don't know if you remember, but when I first got sober, you were one of the first people that I connected with, long before I actually got serious about it. Like when I very first started this program, and I can remember seeing you at a couple of meetings, and to me, you were just bigger than life. And man, I can quote your story because it just made such an impact on me. And I remember, I've heard you tell it a number of times since, but I love it. I love it when you talk about how, the people that you worked with, they'd complain about how you smelt. And then I like it, and I'd like, because you know that stale, nasty smell of alcohol.
Sure.
It's nasty.
It is.
And I remember you telling that how the people that you worked with would complain about how you smelled.
Yeah.
And then I love the story about how these guys came to your house and you were like, well, how do you know that I'm powerless? So tell us about those.
Well, yeah, this was after getting fired from the last radio station I was talking about. I was unemployed for 6 weeks. There wasn't a radio station in Kansas City that would touch me, and finally I did. I went to a job interview with one of the best opportunities I ever had, but I didn't know it at the time. It was an all-black radio station that needed a representative, an advertising representative that knew the market, knew the buyers in the major advertising agencies, and I knew the general sales manager happened to be a white guy. But most of the other employees were black because they were sole station, and it was very lucrative if it was presented right, because there's over 300,000 blacks in Kansas City Metro, and I mean it's bigger than the town of Colorado Springs or something. The black population in Kansas City, so you got a huge market there, and nobody that had any experience selling advertising to talk to major advertising companies to the importance of the black market in Kansas City. Incidentally, when I got to that station, I'd never been, hopefully never been a bigot or anything like that, but I just didn't know how to act. It takes an education, you didn't know what to say. First thing that happened was one of the Kansas City Chiefs was endorsing some product or something. He came in with his manager or the advertising agency that brought him to cut a 60-second radio commercial, and the guy with him was a white guy, the account, and the Kansas City fullback was naturally a black guy, and the guy that was going to record it, the commercial came running out, and he said, "Which one do I talk to?" And I didn't know how to say. Do I say the colored guy or the Negro? And I was contemplating, and I said, "The guy in the blue pants." And fortunately, the guy that came out of the studio to record this spot, I forget his name, he ended up going to work for NBC Network. He did news on our station. And he said, "Come here a minute. I want to tell you something. God damn it, say the black guy." He said, we're proud to be black. He said, our nostrils are wider, our skin's blacker, our lips are thicker, and our hair's kinkier, and we're damn proud of it. So just say the black guy instead of pussyfooting around with he's the guy in the blue pants, And I learned a lot of lessons. Like we had a sales rep that sat next to me. He wore Superfly clothes, kind of like I don't know, Gordon Parks designed his wardrobe or something, I don't know. And but the first time I met him, he came in and he was wearing a cape and some kind of fedora and all this stuff. And I said, "Hi, boy, how you doing?" And I call my kids, "Hey, boy," and my friends, "Hey, boy." And I just said, "Hey, boy, how you doing?" He said, "What the F did you say?" I thought, oh my God, when I said boy, I mean, that just, he really, I just learned a lot of lessons.
Oh, that'd be, yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, I worked for that station for 4 years. Now, here's the deal. after I was there 6 months sober, that one of the stations that fired me called me and said, Bill, we got an opening again. You want to come back? And I had the balls or the sense to say, no, I don't. Said, I like it where I am because my sobriety is the most important thing. If I go to work for a more competitive station, we'd have different office hours, we'd have sales meetings, we'd have this. This way, if I want to go to an AA meeting, I go to an AA meeting. I don't have to take time out and make any excuses. And my sobriety is more important than going back to work for the station that fired me, you know.
Right.
And so I ended up, the station changed format, and they made me the manager of the station.
Wow.
So, and after that, well, here we are building resumes again. Why, after 4 years and a couple of years managing it, Meredith Broadcasting had an opening, and a friend of mine named Lou Campbell called me and gave me a good sales job at there, and I was there about 6 years, and Lou bought a radio station in Denver, and he asked me to come with him. It took about 6 months to him talk me into it, but that's how I got in Denver in 1982. Mm-hmm. And then Lou bought a radio station in the South. Let's see, I forget what town it was. And he sold this station. I went to work with Irv Brown and Woody Page and Dave Logan, and we're doing sports radio, and I've loved it ever since. And then we went with K-Big Radio, the sports station, and ended up did work for Cozy. It was Westinghouse, but Westinghouse sold the station, so I went back with Meredith Broadcasting, worked, went with, not Meredith, but stayed the sports business with Irv Brown and Joe Williams and Woody Page and Dave Logan, and we were the Fan, and I was the first. In fact, I was there when I worked with the Fan. I was the first person hired outside of management, so I was there before it went on the air. Anyway, but alcoholic AA's always been my the priority of whatever I do, wherever I go. I always want to find an AA meeting, and it's not because I'm going to drink, but I might be able to help somebody else not drink.
Right. Because
that's why we're here. That's why we're Stay Sober. I mean, the old slogan is, what can AA do for me? Nothing much. My phone's ringing, but I can't. Anyway, my phone rang. You didn't know it, probably. It rings in my hearing.
No, I could hear it.
Oh, did you? It rings in my hearing aids. But anyway, where were we?
So you were talking about how you go to because you want to, not because you think you're going to drink, because you want to help other people.
Well, sure. That's why we go to meetings, you know. That's why Bill Wilson found Dr. Bob. He knew he couldn't stay sober until he found another alcoholic to help him get sober. And sometimes we forget about that. We come in, and new people come in and forget how this whole thing started. I'm working with a guy right now that can't stay sober, and he's been in and out of prison. He gets drunk about every 6 months, and he has all kinds of resentments, you know, and I tell him that all the resentments he has against his brothers and sisters and stuff like that, because I tell him, you know, the best way to quit having resentments against him is if you can stay sober. You know, there's excuses to drink and reasons to stay sober.
Right.
And every time you get a pissed off at your brother, you get mad at him, and then you drink, and it's just the reason you're validating your brother's reason that thinks you're a screw up, because you are a screw up, because every time you screw up, you get drunk instead of proving to your brother that you can get through this little tiffle, and maybe if you do this several times, and for maybe it might take a year or so, they might say, hey, you're thinking you're doing, you know, you are getting better, but you know, it's
sounds like he just constantly gives his control up to other people.
oh yeah.
Yeah, it's an easy cycle to get into. Those resentments are killers. I know every time I get into a place where I'm resentful, it just rips me up inside, and I have to realize, okay, this is becoming a resentment, and I have to start rethinking how I'm going to approach that.
Right on.
Yeah. So why do you stay? So do you stay so that you can help other people? Do you stay because your life changed for the better when you started making better choices? Why do you stay sober? What kept you sober for this many years?
I like it.
You like it. That's a good answer.
My wife called AA because she wanted me to quit drinking, because she knew that if I quit bringing bottles home, she wouldn't have to drink.
That she wouldn't have to drink.
Yeah, she wouldn't, and that was her reason. Well, so when I got into AA after 6 weeks, I finally quit drinking. And we were big time. We had 3 kids. Matt was born after I got sober, and Peggy got sober. He's been sober 19 years now. But she became gung ho. She was big in Al-Anon. She was big and had the kids in Alteen and all this stuff, you know, and gung ho, all that, you know. So, but her Al-Anon friends got scratching her head a little bit, like every time the Al-Anon meeting was over, Peggy would want to go out and have some drinks, because she knew she couldn't drink at home. She thought the other Al-Anon wives were like that way too. We'd go out and have a few pops after an Al-Anon meeting, you know. And finally, her Al-Anon friend said, you know, Peggy, we think you're going to the wrong meetings. You should go to the one that your husband goes to. Right. And that's when she started. She's 18 months behind me in her sobriety, because she just had an episode about every 2 or 3 weeks that just, you know, and in a way we blame things on, like the economy, particularly our personal economy, home evictions, car repossessions. Come home from work and my son's got a broken football helmet because I bought it at some suck-it-again sports store, you know, some used equipment when he was 13 years old, you know, and it's crying, so I can't play until I get a football helmet, you know, that's safe, you know, and stuff like that. It was just, you know, just everyday life of a financially embarrassed alcoholic that, you know, and so, but now, you know, that very son right now, he's 66 years old, sold his place in Aspen that he'd owned for 20 years and lived there, bought a condo several years ago in Telluride and has remodeled it. It was 3 condos he owned and put it together, and he also has a huge home in Moab. And, you know, all my kids, a lot of the A's know Matt. He's my 19-year-old youngest son. He's 19 years sober, youngest son. He's 38 years old. And, but it runs in the family. And Peggy, who called, my wife, who called AA, you know, we raised a teenage daughter, Jill. She lives in New York City. She's been sober about 12 years this time. She had a slip about 12 years ago. She's been around AA for 20 years. And but anyway, it's a family disease. Yep. Sure is. And my dad died of cirrhosis of the liver. My mother, she drank every day. She worked. She was a political something at the courthouse in Jasper County, Missouri, Joplin. I forget what she was, but she till she was 72 years old. She'd work every day, and she had a thermos jug full of orange juice and vodka she'd take to work, and she drank every day, and she died at age 92. She got a DWI once when she was 90. Oh, wow. And was your mom an alcoholic? I think so. The way she drank, and she mumbled her words at night, and she, when she'd visit us in Colorado, she'd pack a fifth of early times, because she knew that cocktail hour was rather limited at our house, so she always had a bottle of booze in her suitcase. Right. And anyway, but it runs in the family, and so but the question mark, like my brother was, no, she wasn't an alcoholic, but I disagree. I think she was. She just was a different kind. I mean, she, right. You know, but anyway, she's been deceased for almost 12 years. So yeah.
Wow. So your journey, it was not super easy. You lost everything and had to rebuild. And early on, it wasn't super easy. And I remember you even telling me a story at the 18 months while you were sober and your wife wasn't. It wasn't an easy time for you. But the moral of the story is, you know, getting sober, you were able to rebuild. You were able to be successful and have a much better life.
Yeah,
now.
Yeah, and yeah, it's funny. Peggy would, I don't know, I'd come from. I don't know where she'd been or out, but she'd be drunk, and then she would wet the bed and throw up in the middle of the night, and I have to go out and sleep on the couch, and then you know, the next morning, and she says, "Well, I'm not hurting anybody except myself. I don't know why you're." I said, "Peggy, you are hurting." I said, "My bed was wet from you." And there's slop puke all over the bed. I said, "And I'm sleeping out on the couch while you're passed out in bed. And so don't give me that stuff. You're not hurting anybody, you know." But it finally soaked into her. But yeah, it's funny how we think of the fellowship, and the fellowship sometimes works in mysterious ways, because she loved bridge. She just was a good bridge player and liked to play bridge. And our Overland Park, Kansas group had a women anywhere from 4 to 5 tables. In other words, 15, 20, 16, 20 players there, and then eventually they quit asking her. They didn't say, and they even said why. Because, Peggy, this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and we don't drink, and that's the only requirement, is to not is to not drink, and you can play bridge, but we don't, you know, until you get sober, you can't play bridge with us. And we think of fellowship as something, but sometimes that really made her. She loved to play bridge, and she liked the women that exiled her, and some of those little things were probably soaked in, you know. Yeah. So, and since then, I mean, over the years, she's been sober and sponsored a lot of people, and when she died, there was over 300 people at her funeral. We had to have where's the Parker Hall, well, the Pace Center, that's where.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Couldn't find a place to park. And anyway, and most of them were AA people.
She's a pretty popular person.
That was 8 years ago.
Wow. Well, Bill, I was really looking forward to this. You really are a pretty important person in my life. And so I really appreciate that you let me interview you on this. And, you know, maybe we can have you back down the road. I'd love to have you back. But
anytime.
Yeah, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. Bill's a pretty special person in my life, and so this was really, really kind of cool that I got to do this.
I'm glad I got to. Glad I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you or somebody you know are struggling with alcohol or addiction, please connect with me. Your best life is waiting for you. We can find it together. You can reach out to me through the website, through Messenger. I'd love to have the opportunity to talk to you. We are setting up a YouTube channel, and so once that's up and going, we'll start posting that in there. We'd love for you to follow us. Please like, share, comment, and post, and so that these videos can keep reaching a larger and larger demographic. And thanks again, and I hope that we can talk some more. I know that I'll get to see you more, and that'll make my heart happy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I hope that you all enjoy your week, and thank you for watching. Have a good day.
All right.